Millions of years ago, long before humans, the skies were ruled by creatures unlike anything alive today. One of the most incredible of them was Pteranodon, a flying reptile that lived about 70 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period. It wasn't a dinosaur, though many people think it was. Pteranodon was part of a group called pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to truly master flight. It lived near oceans and cliffs, where strong winds made flying easier and food was always close. With a wingspan that could reach up to 7 meters, Pteranodon looked both elegant and terrifying. Its wings were made not of feathers, but of a thin layer of skin stretched over long bones, almost like the wing of a bat. The bones inside were hollow, making them light but strong enough to handle the air currents of prehistoric storms. The name Pteranodon means toothless wing, because unlike earlier pterosaurs, it had no teeth at all. Instead, it used its long beak to catch slippery fish straight from the surface of the water. Some scientists believe it would glide low over the ocean, dipping its beak in like modern seabirds, pelicans or albatrosses. Others think it might have waited on cliffs, spotting schools of fish before diving down in a smooth, powerful glide. But the most recognizable part of Pteranodon's body was its crest, a long, backward-pointing structure on its head. The crest came in many shapes and sizes, depending on the individual. Males had large, extended crests, possibly used to attract females or help balance their bodies during flight. Females had smaller ones. The crest may also have acted like a rudder, helping the animal steer through the air. Pteranodon spent most of its life in the sky or near the sea. On land, it was awkward, walking on all fours with wings folded tight against its sides. But once airborne, it became something else, graceful, silent, and almost weightless. It could ride the ocean winds for hours without flapping its wings, using only the natural air currents. It's hard to imagine how strange that world must have looked. The beaches and cliffs were filled with nests, with hundreds of these flying giants calling to each other. When the wind rose, they launched into the air, soaring above the waves as the sun shimmered on their wings. Pteranodon wasn't just a flyer. It was the master of the sky. It ruled the winds just as the T-Rex ruled the land. For millions of years, nothing could challenge it in its domain. It was a symbol of evolution's genius, turning a land creature into a pilot of the heavens. Even today, when we see birds gliding across the ocean, we are looking at echoes of creatures like Pteranodon, a reminder that flight itself is one of nature's greatest miracles. Pteranodon wasn't just big. It was built for flight in every possible way. Every part of its body, from its bones to its muscles, worked together to make it one of the most efficient flyers the Earth has ever seen. Its bones were incredibly light, filled with air instead of solid marrow. This made the skeleton fragile but extremely easy to lift. The whole body weighed less than a modern turkey, even though the wings were wider than a car. When scientists studied Pteranodon fossils, they found thin walls in its bones, sometimes less than a millimeter thick, yet strong enough to handle powerful ocean winds. Its chest was large and deep, with a strong breastbone for attaching the massive flight muscles. Those muscles gave it the strength to launch itself from the ground or a cliff edge. But once in the air, Pteranodon didn't need to flap constantly. It mostly glided, saving energy while traveling long distances. It used something called dynamic soaring, a technique still used by modern seabirds. It would rise on a warm air current, then glide downward, gaining speed, and repeat the motion again and again. A perfect flying machine of the Cretaceous skies. The wings were the real secret. They weren't covered with feathers like birds. Instead, they were made of skin and muscle layers, stretched from the long fourth finger all the way to the body. This gave Pteranodon incredible control. It could twist its wings slightly to adjust to changing wind, or tilt them for smoother landings. The tips were long and narrow, designed for gliding rather than fast flapping. When the winds were strong, Pteranodon barely needed to move. It could hang in the air, wings stretched wide, its shadow passing silently across the water. On land, it didn't look nearly as majestic. It had to use both its wings and legs to walk, moving in a strange four-legged motion. It wasn't built for running or fighting. Its true power existed only in the air. That's why Pteranodon lived near coastal cliffs and open water. where it could easily launch into flight with a single leap or gust of wind. Its crest, too, played a small role in flight. Some scientists think the large, backward-pointing crest helped balance its long beak. When Pteranodon turned or dove, the crest acted like a counterweight, keeping its flight stable. Others believe it helped with steering or cutting through the air, working like a natural aerodynamic fin. But there was more to this design than just function. It was beauty, raw, natural design at its peak, a creature so perfectly adapted to its environment that it barely needed to evolve further. When we look at its fossils today, we don't just see bones. We see nature's blueprint for how to conquer the sky. For millions of years, this design worked without failure. Pteranodon ruled the air not because of strength, but because of balance. A combination of lightness, power, and control that still inspires engineers and scientists today. Most of Pteranodon's life happened far from land. It was a creature of the open air and endless sea. If you could travel back in time and stand on a Cretaceous beach, you would see them gliding above the water like shadows, rising, diving, and circling in perfect silence. The ocean was their hunting ground. Fish were everywhere. Small, prehistoric herring, squid-like animals, and sometimes even baby sharks. Pteranodon didn't dive deep like modern pelicans. Instead, it used its sharp, long beak to skim across the surface, catching fish near the top of the waves. Its eyes were positioned perfectly for spotting movement below. It could see a flash of silver, even through sunlight on water. When it caught prey, it didn't chew. It simply swallowed the fish whole, its throat stretching as it gulped down its catch. It had no teeth, so every meal had to slide down smoothly. Sometimes fossils show fish bones stuck in their throats, proof that even masters of the sky could make deadly mistakes. Pteranodon often hunted in groups. Dozens of them could be seen flying together above the coast, using teamwork to find schools of fish. When one spotted food, the rest followed the pattern, turning the sea into a feeding frenzy of wings and splashes. But they weren't noisy like modern seabirds. Their calls were low and harsh, carried by the wind, more like the sound of a gust than a scream. They also had to defend their nesting sites. Females likely built their nests on cliffs or sandy slopes, where strong winds made takeoff easy. The males would guard the area, spreading their wings and showing off their large crests to scare away rivals. When eggs hatched, the young were probably able to fly after only a short time. Evolution made them independent fast. They had to be. On the ground, predators like dromaeosaurs or small tyrannosaurs could easily attack a nest. But life wasn't all danger. In the calm of early mornings, Pteranodon colonies could be peaceful. The air filled with wind, the smell of salt and the rustle of wings stretching open for the day's first flight. They ruled a world between two realms. Not quite sea, not quite sky, but something in between. And as they soared above the waves, they connected the earth, the water, and the wind in one endless motion. Their flight was not just a way to move, it was a way to live. A perfect balance between survival and freedom, written in every beat of their wings. Along the ancient shores of North America, the coastline was alive. The sound of the waves mixed with the calls of hundreds of Pteranodon. They weren't just travelers of the sky, they were coastal hunters, perfectly adapted to live between land and sea. The cliffs of what is now Kansas and Texas were once underwater. The western interior seaway divided North America into two halves, and above that ocean, Pteranodon reigned. It was a place full of life. Giant sea reptiles like Mosasaurus, fish as long as cars, and ammonites with spiraled shells. But the true masters of the air were Pteranodon. They could glide for hours, using the sea breeze to stay in flight. When the wind changed, they turned smoothly, adjusting their long wings with perfect precision. Each movement was efficient, nothing wasted, nothing rushed. From the cliffs, they had the perfect view of the endless blue below. Sometimes storms would roll in from the horizon. Huge clouds, dark as night, would cover the sea, and the winds became wild and dangerous. But for Pteranodon, this wasn't just danger, it was opportunity. Strong winds lifted them higher, giving them speed and access to areas far from the coast. When lightning flashed across the ocean, their silhouettes could be seen gliding through the rain, wings stretched wide like shadows of thunder. These hunters weren't alone. The skies were crowded, Smaller pterosaurs darted between them, chasing insects and small prey. But Pteranodon stayed higher. Its kingdom was the open air. No other flyer could match its endurance or its reach. The males often competed for territory. When one entered another's area, they faced each other mid-air, circling, spreading their wings, showing their crests. Sometimes they would clash, but most of the time it was a display of dominance. Whoever looked bigger, stronger, or more confident usually won. It was nature's quiet show of strength, written in the language of flight. Below, the waves kept hitting the cliffs. The wind never stopped. It was a constant rhythm: rise, glide, dive, return. For millions of years, Pteranodon ruled this world, a true master of the coastlines. And every time it lifted off from a cliff and disappeared into the golden light, it carried the power and grace of evolution itself. The world of Pteranodon was not calm. The late Cretaceous period was a time of constant change. Volcanoes shook the land, sea levels rose and fell, and storms were stronger than anything we know today. For Pteranodon, the weather was both a gift and a threat. It depended on wind to fly, but when the skies turned violent, even the master of the air struggled to survive. The hot seas created massive storms that rolled across the ocean for days, with lightning, thunder, and waves as tall as cliffs. When these storms hit the coasts, entire colonies of Pteranodon could be destroyed in a single night. They lived close to danger. Their nests were built on open cliffs and sandy shores, perfect for takeoff but terrible for shelter. When the winds came, adults tried to protect their young with their wings, but sometimes the storm was too powerful. Eggs rolled off the cliffs and nests were swept into the sea. Nature showed no mercy, yet somehow they always returned. After the storm passed, the skies cleared and the survivors rebuilt. They cleaned the nests, searched for food, and the cycle continued. Life never stopped. It only adapted, but the greatest storm was still to come, one that would end the age of giants. As the world grew unstable, temperatures shifted and oxygen levels began to drop. The air became thicker with volcanic ash. Fewer plants meant fewer fish, and fewer fish meant starvation for the flyers that lived above the sea. Even the strongest wings couldn't fight a dying world. Slowly, the colonies grew smaller. The skies that were once full of wings became quiet. One by one, the rulers of the air disappeared. When the asteroid finally struck the Earth, it was the final blow. The shock wave spread through the air and water, burning forests and blackening the sky. For a creature that lived by sight and flight, darkness was death. Without light, there were no winds, no fish, no life above the waves. The age of Pteranodon was over, but its story didn't vanish. Its bones remained buried in stone, waiting for a future world to find them. A world that would look up at the sky and wonder what it was like to fly there when wings ruled the heavens. When the world finally changed and the age of dinosaurs came to an end, the memory of Pteranodon didn't disappear. It remained hidden in the rocks, waiting for someone to uncover its story. Millions of years later, humans found its fossils, perfect outlines of wings, fragile bones frozen in stone. Each discovery told a piece of the same story: the rise, the flight, and the fall of one of nature's greatest flyers. Scientists studied its bones and began to understand how it lived. The long beak, the hollow skeleton, the huge wings, every detail showed how perfectly it was made for the sky. They realized that flight wasn't just an ability. It was survival, freedom, and power all in one. Pteranodon became a symbol of evolution's imagination, proof that nature could design something both strong and light, simple and beautiful. Today, its image is everywhere. In museums, you can stand under a reconstructed skeleton and see how enormous it really was. Its wings stretch wider than most rooms. Children stare up, imagining what it must have been like to see one alive, soaring over the sea with the wind in its wings. In movies, books, and art, Pteranodon lives again. It represents adventure, courage, and the mystery of life long before humans. Every time we watch a bird glide over the ocean, we see a trace of that ancient design. The balance, the shape, the spirit of the first true flyers. Some people say that birds are the descendants of dinosaurs. That may be true, but in another way, they're also the descendants of a dream of the sky that began with creatures like Pteranodon. When we look at the sky today, we're seeing the same blue world that it once ruled. The wind hasn't changed. The air still carries the same power. Pteranodon may be gone, but it taught nature how to fly, and that lesson never disappeared. Every feather, every wing beat, every bird that rises against the wind, it all began with the rulers of the ancient sky. The age of dinosaurs is gone, but their story is not. Every fossil, every footprint, every piece of stone still holds their memory. They once ruled the land, the sea, and the sky, and even after 65 million years, they continue to live through what they left behind. When we study them, we don't just learn about the past. We learn about survival, adaptation, and the power of life itself. Creatures like T-Rex, Triceratops, Pteranodon, and Spinosaurus all show how nature can create endless forms of strength, beauty, and balance. Their world was harsh, but it was alive, full of battles, evolution, and change. And even though they disappeared, their legacy never did. Today, we see it in birds flying above us, in reptiles basking under the sun, in the earth that still carries their bones. The dinosaurs taught nature how to evolve, and in a way, how to begin again. They remind us that nothing truly ends. It only transforms. The world they left behind became the one we live in today. Their time may have passed, but their spirit still moves through every living thing. The Titans will return, not as monsters, but as memories, discoveries, and inspiration for the generations that follow. Through science, imagination, and curiosity, their story continues to fly.